Thank you very much for your kind words. Good morning to all of you. I hope I am audible to all of you. Am I? At least one of you can say, maybe Shanmugam or somebody can. Okay. Thank you very much. And I hope you're also able to see my slides. Okay. Are you able to see my slides?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much. So, in fact, I take this opportunity to thank Dayanand Sagar Academy of Technology and Management, Department of Electrical and Electronics Engineering, who have put up this program. And really, I'm thankful to all the organizers, especially Dr. Shanmuga Sundar, who has been reaching out to me for quite some time now. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to share whatever little I've been doing for some time in the water space, with you people. And I also should recollect something similar some time back. It was done by NITK Surathkal, and we about smart water system. Similar, why I'm seeing that drawing the parallelities about same electrical electronics engineering department had conducted about the something similar to about smart systems, and I happened to be a part of that. It's sometime back, about maybe 2 years or something. Well, I think what I'm going to do is, more than answering all the questions, maybe I'll be posing quite a bit of questions, and as we go along, as you can see there. And also, I think whatever I'm going to talk is obviously the work of my own PhD students, several of them, and then who have done quite a bit of work. And of course, they have settled down in their own academic sphere. Some of them are still doing their PhD that way. And I will just take you through some of these slides. Hello, yes, sir. Am I audible? Yeah. Hello. Shanmugha Sundar, can I continue? Am I audible? Hello. Shanmugha Sundar, am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Hello?
sir. No.
Oh, okay. Because somebody talked in between, so I got a doubt.
Must be there. That is there for from us.
Sorry. I have a lot of crosstalk. Shall I continue? What should I? Would you kindly mute, sir? Can I request, so that we can have the question answer session at the end, sir? Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'll continue my lecture with permission of the organizers. So I think without taking much time, I'll try to go through it, and probably about an hour or more than an hour, we will talk about all these, whatever the slides I have, and we'll have sufficient time for discussion. In fact, I will love to have more discussion than this one. So the whole title of my talk is Smart Water Systems Enabling Sustainable Water Supply. Ultimately, we need to have a sustainable water supply, and especially when you're talking about a city, smart cities we are talking about, how do we ensure that is the question? And how are we going to make sure we are able to have this continuous sustainable water supply? And my own take in any smart cities is, without a smart water system, how can the city can become smart? That's from the perspective of me being a water engineer. That's how I try to pose that question. Well, I think my talk will actually deal with basically population growth, rapid urbanization, how it is going to increase the stress on water sources, and looking at the supply, is it adequate, reliable, safe, that itself. And India being the second highest populated country, obviously the challenge is very big. And of course, we also look at the very large amount of our population. They live in we have a rural population, and quite a bit, of course, in the urban situation, we have a lot of water supply, but still it lacks in quality, quantity, things like that, which we are going to see. And of course, we also have the scarcity of piped water supply due to the supply system. We have intermittent supply, which we need to really address, how to address such issues. And this intermittency is also actually having a lot of side effects on physical and structural integrity of the water system, which you are going to see. And basically, the non-supply hours with low pressure, in fact, it obviously leads to a lot of cross-contamination. And of course, this contamination of the source, aging infrastructure, breaks, cross-contamination. Hello, please. Cross-contamination, pure sanitation practices, all this will add to a lot of issues and challenges, as you can see. Any integrated urban water management system, we can look at this chart here, where we are going to have what you call integrated water sources management, which consists of obviously the potable water, sustainable water supply, and wastewater, green water recycling, and stormwater, rainwater harvesting, together which when you try to look at how much of stormwater reuse can be done, how much of sewer flow management can be done, and we can bring it back into the supply system, and how much of demand management can be done. These are the things which probably one can really look at. And to do any of these things, obviously you need a lot of monitoring and measurement which will be required to do that. This is typical general water supply scenario in any city. As you can see, you have a lot of population growth, you have urbanization, you have also climate change, which has got led to its own effect, especially the sharp duration rainfall, high intensity rainfall, which is going to come. And so obviously you're going to have all these things will have kindly mute, sir. It's going to have a lot of water resources. Maybe Shanmugha Sundar can make an announcement to kindly mute to people. Can you make an announcement, Shanmugha Sundar?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Sorry, sir.
Yeah.
Kindly request all the participants, please mute yourself. Even I am putting repeated messages in the group, WhatsApp group. So please mute yourself.
Yeah, even when you log in, kindly mute it and come, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you. So when you try to look at the water resources, you are going to have surface water, which could be the rivers, lakes, etc. You have groundwater. You have alternate sources of water like rainwater harvesting. And of course, any surface water, we are going to treat it in a water treatment plant. Then, of course, we are going to distribute it to urban water distribution system. There are a lot of side impacts. You have the non-revenue water, unacceptable pressure, intermittent supply, aging infrastructure, high energy consumption, cross contamination, etc. You also have the impacts of groundwater, uncontrolled pumping. Kindly mute, sir. Kindly mute, please. Kindly mute. Impacts of uncontrolled pumping, non-metering, cross contamination, etc. Then alternate sources of rainwater harvesting, you need to treat it and bring it back to consumer. Whenever you try to see it, as much as possible, especially groundwater and the alternate sources, the sufficient treatment will be done and brought it to the consumer. After consumer uses, we have wastewater which is generated. So it goes to wastewater treatment plant, comes back out to the surface water body or elsewhere. And of course, even the untreated waste also will go back. And then, of course, depending on the type of the treatment, will be treated and put it back into circulation. This is the general type of pattern in any city. So what we can see here, the problems are messy urbanization, rural to urban migration, expansion of urban areas, merging of surrounding villages, emergence of cities. These are all the things which are the problems which are there. So if you try to look at the climate change effect, I think I lost the slide here. Shanmugha Sundar, I lost the slide here. So I lost the slide here. Some control was taken or what? No? I lost the control of the slide. Dr. Sundar?
Not PPT.
नाम तुम्हारा मैंने डाल रखा गीगा चल
Okay, now I got back. Thank you very much. I got back.
Saurabh Kumar.
Yeah. Lot of crosstalk to Dr. Sundar. Can you talk? Lot of crosstalk.
Expel, madam.
Dr. Sundar, can you mute everybody as an organizer?
Yeah.
Other than me? Yeah, thank you. So you have the role of climate change and rainfall, as you can see. So with the temperature rise, so obviously you have the warmer air, more evaporation, more precipitation locally is going to have. Rising temperature, increased evaporation will result in more precipitation. in a short duration, obviously there could be increased risk of flooding. And of course, you also have possible that in some cases you can have less precipitation and increases of drought also is there. So risk of mitigation plans are all possible when you try to look at. And when you try to look at the areas of vulnerable change for climate change across, as you can see, the red ones will show the type of things where it's affected more. You are going to have lesser rainfall as you come across. And the climate change is going to have a continuous effect across the whole country, as you can see here. I'm not going to read the statistics here. We should understand that this is going to have a very huge effect on the whole country water resources. What is really one should understand here is you have the source, you have the pathway, you have the receptor. In the source, you have the rainfall. Of course, you have also the pesticides which are going to be used on the agricultural fields, which is going to leach into the groundwater. And it's also possible that pathways you can have the surface water contamination, you can have the groundwater contamination. You have the receptor at the end. It can obviously affect both the surface water as well as groundwater, also on the flora and the fauna. One need to really understand how to really contain this and how to take whatever the effect is required. It's also possible that we have the source security. As you can see here, the two types of satellite pictures are shown of some Lake Powell. So Colorado River, as you can see, the river is shrunk. So this is also possible with time. The river itself, the less flows will happen. All these things are possible to really study through satellite and images to understand what is happening to the whole catchment itself. So when you try to look at sources of water, Shanmuga Sundar, I'm audible, no? Shanmuga Sundar, I'm audible, right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. You only keep the control, then we'll.
Yeah.
Sources of water, you have the rivers, streams, lakes. They are the main source of water supply. About 70% of untreated industrial waste are also dumped into surface water, and this can lead to a lot of surface water contamination with hazardous organic and inorganic chemicals. Groundwater, which is the supplementary source of water, is polluted with microbial and chemical contaminants, and there is a need to protect the sources of drinking water, and of course, we need to regulate the groundwater withdrawal. So when you take our own state, Karnataka state, the source security, as you can see here, we have basically 7 basins. Of course, 5, 6, 7 are combined in terms of north, south Pennar and Palar river basins. The major are Krishna, Kaveri and Godavari. Very small amount is there in Godavari. West flowing rivers is very large. As you can see here, 57% of our water which falls on goes out of our west coast. It doesn't mean that we should stop every drop of water. It makes definitely not correct in terms of environment and ecology. We should respect that. At the same time, we should also see the possibility whether we can transfer some of that water to the upstream side so that we can have sufficient water security. So the environmental management and drinking water catchments, as you can see, protection of human and health and environment becomes very important. That obviously controlled through drinking water supply. We can also have a lot of catchment activities which need to be taken care of, like what we talked about, the pesticides and other things, fertilizers which are being put, can we control them? And health related risk assessment management also need to be looked into. And equally important is environmental risk assessment and management, IWRM. These things also need to be looked into if you want to really take care of the security and quality of the water. As we can see, the spatial pattern of croplands and forests in India have undergone tremendous change. This is of course, all these sources of these slides are also given here from 1880 to 2010. As you can see, the dramatic change is there in terms of forest and croplands. As we expect, obviously, we have a very large population. We need to grow food and other things. At the same time, we are also paying a lot of penalty in terms of both environment and ecology, which we should keep it in mind. And when you try to look at the effects of catchment contaminants on water quality, it can happen due to suspended solids, chemical hazards, inorganic chemicals, natural organic substances, anthropogenic organic chemicals, semi-volatile organic compounds, arsenic, emerging pollutants. Emerging contaminants also they talk about, or micropollutants is another thing which people talk about. So when you try to look at the different things here, as you can see the picture here itself, you have the domestic animals, you have the excreta, then you have the soil contamination, It can go through the food chain. It can also have the effect on the recreational areas, runoff. You can also have the wildlife. So basically, the contaminant can move in different zones and spheres. We need to really take care of what is happening to this in terms of the different compartments of the environmental protection. When you try to look at the overall world hydrological cycle, as you can see here, in terms of the water content, the groundwater is the dominant one, which somehow we don't see it. We presume it's not that important. We understand the amount of groundwater stored world over is very, very large. Obviously, it becomes our responsibility to protect it. Then comes ocean and seas. Then comes ice caps and glaciers. You have also heard of a lot of melting of glaciers. Then comes soil moisture. You can see lakes and reservoirs are very small, but at the same time, you can also see the time of return in all these things are completely changed. Some of them are only 1 year, 2 years, some of them 1 week, 1 year, 2 years, like that. Some of them can come back or being stored. The water is of very, very large time, thousands of years. So when you try to look at any conceptual model of a watershed, you have obviously some sort of a activity, natural processes, you have animals, and then you have the industries, you have the housing and other things. Each one of them will have its own way of actually the water will come out into the lakes and water bodies and have its own signature of the effect of all these activities which need to be kept in mind. So catchment conditions and transport process becomes important. So we need to really understand what will happen to conducting catchment inspection, overland surface and near surface transport, implementing control measures in agriculture, direct precipitation, spillage or discharge due to surface water can happen, base flow or subsurface transport through the unsaturated zone and deep groundwater flow can also happen in this case. So impacts of climate change on surface water quality. So you have the climatic change happen on the drinking water treatment, retention, coagulation, degradation, disinfection. It can also, we can have the adaptation measures and design control efficiency. And of course, we also bring in chemicals, byproducts, all these things can have quite a bit of effect. We can also have emerging pollutants and pathogens, the fate, like for example, THM production, trihalomethanes are also can get, the production can happen in these things. If we try to look at the resilient water and wastewater infrastructure, as you can see in this cartoon, you have the catchment from the hills and down the line into the catchment. There is a supply. Then, of course, there is a treatment. From the treatment, it goes to drinking water distribution system into the city, and the wastewater will be collected. And of course, it will be treated and let it out. Quite a bit of the treatment is not being done. That is one of our problems. It's also possible that we can catch the stormwater also. That means for the water which is coming from the rain and treat it as use it into the city, which is slowly starting right now. And when you try to look at the resilience of water technology to climate change applicability, there are different categories: potentially resilient to all expected climate changes, potentially resilient to most of the expected climate changes, potentially resilient to only restricted number of climate changes. Technologies, they have been categorized under this. Of course, we can look at the source. It could be piped water supply, protected springs, dug wells, unprotected dug wells, etc. So when you try to look at overall, we need to do what's called water balance studies. So it should be reliable, resilient, and we should also do vulnerability analysis. So water balance approaches have been successfully used to study water use and productivity at the basin level. Water balance from source to consumer and at different levels can help in saving huge quantity of water. Knowledge of reliability, resilience, and vulnerability is important in understanding of the system behavior. Required flow rate at the required pressure need to be ensured. How quickly it can recover from a failure, that's a resilience, need to be addressed. The severity of failure, respectively, failure also need to be understood. So as you can see here, you have precipitation, you have evaporation, you have storage, you have runoff, you have usage, and one need to really balance out these things to understand what's going to happen to that. So the challenges, the operation and maintenance is a huge challenge. Somehow in our system, we are all used to building up big projects, but O&M lacks a lot. And as the system gets aged, its performance goes down. And as you can see here from the left cartoon, because the service level, access, quantity, quality, if it's not done properly, the efficiency keeps going down. And when you really maintain the operation maintenance well, your ongoing O&M, renewal, replacement, etc., the type of the performance, as you can see from the graph, it will be much better. So in all these things, one should understand operation and maintenance of the whole system becomes equally important as, for example, building the new system itself. So that way, when you have a proper operation, maintenance, and management, continually improvement in service will happen. Leakage management need to be done. Water quality monitoring can be done. Pressure management can be done. All these things, what I am trying to stress is, without proper monitoring, without proper measurement, without proper communication, these things cannot be done. Obviously, all these things become important, especially from the angle of measurement, monitoring, and then the decision making. See, management of unaccounted for water is very, very important in a water distribution system. So unaccounted for water is as high as 50% in many of the urban cities in India. By controlling the UFW, water is in fact, we can even quite a bit, if we can save in this, it's as good as actually starting another project. Leakage is usually the major cause of water loss in the water distribution systems. There are also possible you have illegal connections or water theft that can also be identified if you have proper monitoring mechanisms. And also pipe breakages, infrastructure connectivity, and aging of the pipelines, they are the basic reasons. And most common method adopted by water authorities is minimum night flow method. So during night flow, you have the minimum flow, then you try to track where the leakages happen. Lot of studies are conducted in leakage management and identification of the leakage. One should understand that. Automatic leakage loggers to detect the acoustic signals from leakages at night has also been fixed at many places. Leak control by means of pressure management in DM is also possible. We can talk about it as we go along in some of the slides I can show you. Equally important, we spend huge energy in moving water. A huge amount of energy is used to moving water around. The energy cost is highest for water distribution system operations. The amount of energy used for pumping can be optimized using by pump scheduling techniques. Different types of optimization techniques are used in this regard. Remarkable reductions in operation costs can be achieved by proper pump scheduling. Pump scheduling using modern techniques is necessary in all the urban water distribution systems. As you can see here, the in-plant water pumping, raw water pumping, water treatment, finished water pumping. As you can see, the percentage of energy which is here from the source to the treatment to distribution to the tap, how much of power is being used is the one which is been discussed in this paper. So one really need to understand how to reduce the energy, how to really bring down the energy in moving water becomes very, very important. And it's also possible, it's not only the water we keep on bringing from outside, is it possible for water conservation is the question which we should ask ourselves. And at the utility level, reducing non-revenue water, NRW leaks, etc. So that one way you can, by doing that, you are conserving water. By improving the operation and maintenance practices, is obviously you are conserving water. At the public level, can we do the rainwater harvesting? Is it possible for the one of the obviously it's the rainwater harvesting? It's one of the purest forms of water if it's collected properly. It will provide water autonomy and reduces dependence on water supply. It's possible that if you were to do a proper rainwater harvesting, possibly you may use very minimal water from the supply of the water board or something like that. And there are instances where people are not even taken connection; they are depending on rainwater, harvested rainwater itself. And of course, general awareness of the wasteful practices and their elimination need to be looked into. With all these things, technology intervention is the key here. That's the whole thing about this talk itself, and how the technology intervention for water can be done. And IoT in water conservation for future generation. We all talk about IoT in water. Let us just try to look at in what way it is possible, what are the things which are being done, how it can be done. Is it possible to have a fully automated water supply, real-time data acquisition, proper asset management, early detection of event, flexible to meet future challenges, and online hydraulic modeling, can it be done? Automated control systems, can it be done? Is the type of questions which we ask ourselves. And let us look at it, IoT for water components. So obviously you have sensors and actuators, automated meter reading, SCADA system, GIS, pipe burst prediction model, hydraulic model. All these things will lead to smart water network, demand forecasting, risk maps, pressure optimization, NRW management, etc. If you were to have all these things, obviously you have a full control on the water distribution system, and it is not imaginary. There are countries or there are places where already it's going on. Probably it's high time we should be doing it. Though I will also share with you, we may doing it partly here and there. We may not have the integrated one as I'm showing this schematic. It may not be there fully in our system yet. So when you try to look at the monitoring of event detection, we call any system which changes from one state to another state, we call it as an event. For example, if there is a leakage, we call it as an event. Can we detect that event? For example, the leakage assessment, quantifying water loss, technique for quantifying the leak, developing leakage management strategy, leakage monitoring in the zones or sectors, DMA concept. DMA is district metering area. We create subzones, as you can see here in the cartoons, where you have a better control. See, for example, here we have the river, we have abstraction meter, we have raw water main, we have water treatment works, we have a SCADA and the super key meter we have. Then we have the ball valves to control this source reservoir or a mother reservoir. Then we have a control to different areas. At every area, we are going to have flow meters and controls. That way, the whole water movement can be controlled. We can understand what is happening to the whole system. It is not only the flow, one can even put the pressure meters and also to understand. Of course, if it is put through SCADA and other things, we will get the full information and one can decide how the system is performing. And the supply, when we try to take it, for example, even in our own Bangalore itself, the water level, the topo level varies a large from 940 meters to it goes up to 860 meters across the city. So in such a schematic, as you can see here, you have a reservoir on the hill, you have some houses in the valley portion, some in the ridge portion, and some, of course, you again in the valley portion. How do you make sure the equal pressure in these things is a challenging task? Obviously, you need to throttle a lot, and then release the pressure for this low pressure area at the peak, and again you have to throttle a lot. So one has to really make sure they get with adequate pressure in all these things. That itself is a very challenging problem for a hydraulic engineer. And of course, ultimately, we may say from a hydraulic perspective, we can calculate and tell you, but it ultimately becomes an electrical or an electronic engineer, a control engineer's job to bring such or a mechanical engineer to control it and give the adequate supply in terms of pressure and quantity. So data analytics, machine learning, AI data mining has become very, very important, and a lot of work is going on in this area. And when you try to see for example, you can see the historical time series of the data is given here, and using machine learning tools, one can actually predict what's going to happen. If you observe now, is it possible to predict what's going to happen in the future is the one which one can look at it. So real-time databases can be mined for behavioral patterns, use historical data to predict future behavior, effectively incorporate uncertainties, climate or population impacts, etc. So there's a demand management you can look at. It can bring in, one can enable robust decision making. Ultimately, you need to really decide to match the demand and supply using such time series data analysis. Is it possible to do that is the question. So this is a real data which we have measured across the city in south of Bangalore, which I'm going to share a little later also. There will be a lot of inequity of water supply across different segments and different things. Here we have about 83 DMAs. The blue one shows the UFW unaccounted for water, and the mud color one shows the consumption of water in LPCD. As you can see across, in terms of, you can vary from anywhere from 100 or even 60, 70 liters. It can going up to 250 liters or something like that per capita is there. The average thing which the CPHEO nominates, recommends is 135 liters per capita per day. That means per person, one should get about 135 LPCD in a mega city like this. But of course, if you add the leakages, at the tap 135, at the source it should be about 150 LPCD. As you can see, this inequity will be due to various reasons about hydraulic limitation, source not being properly supplied to those areas. How do you bring equity across this? This is only a part of the city. This is about 150 square kilometers or something in South City. That itself, you have a lot of inequity, and also you can see a lot of leakages. Can we reduce this leakage is the question which one has to ask here. And one can even develop inequity index as we can go along here. What we call Lorenz curve is a graphical representation of the distribution of, it's used in the economics for income or wealth, but one can use it for the measure the inequity also. The ratio of area enclosed by the equality line and the Lorenz curve divided by the total area under the equality line gives the Gini coefficient. As you can see here, the cumulative percentage of population as it goes here, in terms of the percent of water being supplied, the ideal curve is a 45-degree line. As you can see here, it's a slack curve. As you can see, the inequity is a part of the system itself. As much as possible, we should move towards that 45-degree line is the one which we should ask ourselves. How do we control them? How do you bring in equity in a system which has got built-in a lot of inequity into the system itself? Obviously, you need to bring in a lot of controls and other gadgets to do that, and you can bring in other waters also. For example, we can also looking at the Bangalore's water supply demand supply gap. So we have the cartoon here from 1991 up to 2025. As you can see here, blue is the supply, green is the demand, red is the gap. As you can see, demand supply gap is only increasing, and 2011 it came down because a lot of other projects came up. 2025 it's again going to go up because our institute, the city is growing in population, and as you are doing new projects, the population is only increasing. Obviously, demand supply gap goes increasing. So you can also look at the projection. This is from the socio-economic change on the left side. You also have the source from the BWSSB itself. It goes up to 2051, starting from 2021. You have 2100 MLD of water which is required as you can demand, and it goes up to 4100 MLD. Right now, the supply to Bangalore city is about 1500 MLD is being supplied. We are going to get Kaveri fifth stage water, which will bring in another 775 MLD. Roughly in another 3-4 years, we are going to get about 2200 MLD, which roughly this 2021 we can meet. But by that time, again, the demand increases. That's what is happening. How are you going to make sure that demand supply gap reduces? That's the one which we need to ask ourselves. What you are seeing here is actually a supply in a part of the Mysore area in the German press area in Mysore. So what we are trying to do here is there is a mother tank which will bring in water, and then which will be used to supply to these overhead tanks, as you can see here. From these overhead tanks, the water will be supplied to the area to meet 24/7 water supply. As you can see here in all these tanks, the water should not overflow, and of course the tank should not drain as the supply is given to the area. One can see here you have the, as per CPHO, you have the two peaks. One peak in the morning is a bigger peak, another peak in the afternoon is a smaller peak. Sundar, am I audible? Sundar, am I audible? Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh, thank you. Okay. These are the two peaks which has to be followed. This is called the 24/7 water supply. If you want to do that, you have to follow these two peaks, one in the morning, another in the evening, as much as possible. Subjected to none of these tanks are either overflowing or completely getting drained. So this problem has been posed in as an optimization problem. We have developed a tool called WaterOpt along with Rajesh Amrutur, Bharadwaj Amrutur, and other people in IISc, along with others, my own students. We have developed this. And the thing will be when you try, sorry, I'll just go back here. So this optimization problem is a very challenging one to do that. So you have to make sure, as I keep on repeating, from the mother tank, you will get water to all these tanks, what you can see here. And then these tanks, you have to control them. Otherwise, some of them will overflow, or some of them will drain much faster than as the supply takes place. You have to match the demand and supply, make sure all these things. And this has been posed an optimization problem. In fact, we have developed a model to do that. And it's also been implemented in the part of German press area in Mysore. So this is also possible. We have the strategic master planning for the Bangalore city itself. As you can see here, this is the whole Bangalore city water supply is given here. The master plan for water supply, sewage system, and asset management that need to be done in any of these things. What we are going to talk about in IoT, we need to do. futuristic and sufficiently resilient and to withstand the future water challenge, one need to pose that. To promote optimal, effective, and integrated water use of water resources, best practices in water and sewage utilities and water and sewage asset management. One need to strive to identify potential alternative sources of water. We need to really think about it in future in advance. We cannot say that from tomorrow I'm going to bring it. Many of them, for 10 years in advance, you plan and try to do that, how to bring in water for the future. And holistic and integrated evaluation of all available and current water sources, identifying alternative sources, strategies, all this need to be looked into if you are doing the master planning. In fact, we have a master plan for Bangalore for 2051. It is with BWSSB, and any of you want to visit that, it's possible to do that. It's a public document, it's available. So when you try to look at the one key thing which is seen is the wastewater becomes a very good resource if you are able to treat it properly and use it. So that way the wastewater utility master plan also being looked into in BWSSB, and elsewhere also it's being done in other cities as well. So evaluating existing collection system, planning projections, model development and calibration, conveyance system analysis, system improvement recommendations, collection system maintenance review, monitoring, measuring, and program modification. All these things need to be done. Of course, this is a schematic from city of Boulder, but similar thing is also being done in Bangalore and even in some other cities as well in across India. And we need to really continually improve the existing water infrastructure, because most of the time our infrastructure are getting old. That is a problem, and ultimately if the infrastructure is not maintained properly, the service level goes down. So all the more the reason we need to maintain it properly. That way one need to really reduce the non-revenue water. We need to really do the asset management, how the assets are performing. We need to strengthen the existing infrastructure to take the future load. Is it possible? It's not suddenly I can load anything I want. The system has to be designed for future, so that if you want to push more water, is there a flexibility in the design itself? And we need to really meet the international standards on leakage. For example, just to share with you people, the leakage in Tokyo City is 3%. Let me repeat. The leakage in Tokyo City is 3%. Whereas in our Bangalore itself, it's about 40% we have. And we are not very far. London is also around that things. That way, it's not a dubious comparison, though I will say. But many of the developed cities across where they have spent a lot of their money on infrastructure, the leakage can be anywhere from 10 to 15%. For example, in Singapore, it is a fully monitored network in all aspects. Probably it's hovering around 10%. So we need to really move towards that. From our 50% leakage, can we move to that with proper maintenance, monitoring, and instrumentation? That's the question. And of course, a lot of studies are going on, field studies are going on, the projects by BWSSB. L&T is doing huge projects to reduce the leakage. They have brought it down from 45% to about 36% in some of those areas. As I mentioned to you, rainwater harvesting becomes very, very important. So capturing rainwater where it falls is the key. And it also replenishes groundwater through recharging of rainwater by using the soil column, reducing pollution contamination, reducing the water bill. Obviously, you would reduce, and it provides clean and safe water locally. And equally important, it reduces the flooding of the roads. If you are able to catch everybody, it's the amount of water which goes into the drains in the road will reduce. And of course, the overall catchment, the soil erosion also will be reduced. Recycled water, as I keep on telling, becomes very, very important. So recycled water supply, in fact, I should mention here, BWSSB, BDA is implementing this scheme in Nadaprabhu Kempegowda layout. A dual pipeline is being done for 4,000-acre area and trying to provide 24/7 fresh water supply to everyone in this layout, and also providing underground sewage system and network, providing adequate number of sewage treatment plants for treating 100% of sewage in membrane bioreactor technology. That means it's a tertiary treated water. It's almost drinkable, potable, but will be given for non-potable purposes. And also using the new age engineering solution of dual plumbing to provide 24/7 recycled water. So on-demand supply will be there 24/7. And of course, it also roughly about 30 LPCD of wastewater is supplied, whereas then one can reduce the fresh water from 135 to 100. But then there is tremendous pressure. Even the fresh water also they'll ask at 130 or 135. Then you have another 30 of the recycled water. That way you have more excess water available in such areas. I should also mention here, maybe the slide may come. We have done this thing in Institute of Science campus. We have about 1 mld of water, about 25% of our wastewater we recycle it, treat it to tertiary level, and we have a separate reticulation system to supply for non-potable purposes, including gardening, toilet flushing, and other things. As I'm talking about this, the institute campus, as I'm showing here. So we have 24% recycled water supply. So we are very proud of this system, which is running very well. And probably many campuses across India, including I know some of the IITs are also doing this. I hope many of the other institutions will take a lead and do this so that we can save water. Obviously, it can be used for even drinking purposes if it done properly, but we are not doing that, as I mentioned, for toilet flushing, cooling, and so many other purposes we are doing. And all new buildings, it's mandatory have to use the recycled water in our IISc campus. So at a city scale, we need to have some sort of a water balance study need to be done. And also we need a resilient and safe city that is adapted to current and future extreme weather events. Water cycle that supports the health, well-being and enjoyment of everyone. Water is not just for the consumption. Recreation also becomes very important. The environment, ecology and other things. Water managed for biodiversity, public health becomes very important. Open spaces. Efficient use of fit for purpose water contributes to the improved sustainability. It's not that you should treat it everything to the highest standard and let it out. Fit for purpose treatment is the one which need to be done. This cartoon is from city of Melbourne. Such similar exercises are also being done in some of the cities in India, including Bangalore. We are trying to strive to do that across. People are talking about what's called spawn cities. In fact, in China, they are talking about a lot. Spawn city indicates a particular type of city that does not act like an impervious system, and not allowing any water to filter, but it allows most of the water to filter through. So more clean water for the city, cleaner groundwater, reduction in flood risk, lower burdens on drainage systems, enriched biodiversity. So many cities are all working towards spawn city, especially in, as I mentioned, in China, they're trying out, and we should also be doing some of the cities across here. So when you try to look at, as I already mentioned, how much of water we are getting in Bangalore, but population density is 13 times higher than Karnataka average, consumes 50% of Kaveri water reserved for domestic use in Karnataka. As much as 49% of this water supplied is what is called unrained water, more than 40, now it is reduced, as I said. Each person here, 150 LPCD at the source point, but at the tap, he should get about 135, but in some of the average, the worst will be, he gets about 65 LPCD of water because of the inequity and other things. People also talk about what's called aquifer storage and recovery, ASR. It is possible to store water in sand and it comes back later, sand or the geological formation, and extract the exact amount of water. This concept is aquifer storage and recovery. It's been done in Texas and elsewhere. They are operating 3 units. And the advantage is no water evaporates. Aquifer can be huge storage locations where water can be put in times of plenty and later use it. So obviously in this case, whenever we want to do the recharging, water has to be of very high quality, including potable standards. Here it has to be treated to very high standards if you are directly injecting. If you are going to go through the soil strata and all, possibly one can afford to have a little less quality of water. And also it's possible at many places, people are doing floodwater harvesting. The aim of floodwater harvesting is to store floodwater in artificial closed ponds and allow it to really seep into the ground slowly so that the local groundwater recharge will take place. At the same time, the local flooding also will reduce. So this is a schematic of the KC Valley project. Many of you would have heard about it. Probably would have read in newspaper elsewhere and even articles. This consists of the transfer of from KC Valley and Bellandur 440 MLD of secondary treated water to fill 138 tanks in Kolar. And these tanks are the irrigation tanks. The largest distance the water travels is about 140 kilometers, and it fills up the several tanks. It's a combination. It's a combination of the pumping and gravity flow. All the dotted lines, what you are seeing, are the gravity flows. Or the full lines, what you are seeing is the pumping, and the water will be pumped to the ridge points, to the local ridge points. It will be allowed to get into certain tanks. and the cluster of tanks from each of the tanks will be a mother tank which will feed into other tanks. So in all 138 tanks in Kolar is being filled using this. Already this scheme is running. Secondary treated water, the quality of water is reasonably good, and especially for groundwater recharge. And out of 138 tanks, about more than 50%, about more than 70 to 80 tanks have already filled up in Kolar. If any of you go that side, you can see that this is one of the largest recycled water transfer in the world, which has been done in Karnataka. And of course, I should also mention here, Bangalore is no longer a sink taking all the energy and water. It is a source for the neighboring areas where it gives the treated water to the neighboring areas. And there's also people are talking about regenerating Vrishbhavati Valley. Vrishbhavati river is getting polluted due to suspended inflow, the treated sewage and industrial effluents. The valley had nearly 71 lakes, which is now reduced to 35 lakes in 2017. 54% of the sewage generated is treated when the plants are running at their full potential. In order to treat the sewage generated in the valley, decentralized treatment option needs to be adopted. Along the valley, reed beds, wetland plants, and other vegetation cover can be help in the nutrients. And this is slowly being done in the Vrishbhavati Valley. Of course, it takes time. People are trying to do that here. And when you try to look at the water security, what is water security? Is it the storage on the ground, on the surface, or below the ground, or in the soil? Is it the right quality of water for the right purpose? The connectivity to the source and demand points at the different scales? Is it the flexibility designed for storage as well as in delivery systems? Is it the water balance at space and time scales? What is the security we are talking about? Or a combination of all these things is the question. So one of the things when we try to talk about, as I mentioned to you, is the reducing inequity at various levels. So taking the example of Bangalore, we have zones on the left side, 5 zones what we have seen. We have divisions, as you can see here. We have subdivisions, and then the ward. As you look at the both space in these things, the inequity becomes automatically the big problem. And as you are supplying here the water, how do you ensure as much as possible the reducing inequity? You can how much of inequity can be reduced is the question. As a part of this project, Imprint project, we have taken up south of Bangalore, 152 square kilometers in south of Bangalore. And we are, as I mentioned to you, are looking at the inequity of water supply between distinct metering areas to assess the inequity in intermittent water supply between the various DMAs of Bangalore using various inequity indices. We have the data of flow meters and pressure gauges like this. You have below you is the network what is given here. As you can see here, we have done the analysis in terms of the elevation, in terms of the things. That elevation also matters a lot. You have the higher areas, lower areas, which also lead to inequity. And also you have the individual consumer meters, as you can see here. Using these things, we have the Equator project, what we're trying to look at. In the whole objective is to understand the complex water distribution networks in this area, explain the inequity among the DMAs. As you can see here, we are trying to explain do the analysis in terms of the inequity, both red and green. As you can see here, how much red is the supplied and the blue is the consumed. As you can see here, there is a tremendous inequity which comes here. Identify a candidate for JP Nagar. We are doing a complete hydraulic analysis in the JP Nagar area, and to develop a water quality model. The quality of the water in this treatment plant will be very good. As it moves through the old infrastructure, it loses the quality, especially the chlorine will get attenuated. As it moves, how the water quality changes is the one which we are trying to look at. And ultimately, we need to really control and schedule the water supply. And we need to really help in BWSSB to translate our algorithms and the controls into practice. That's the one which we have put here, which we are actually trying to do along with BWSSB. And of course, we have some certain work packages, what you can see here, the assessment, then development of hydraulic model, development of demand supply model, leak detection algorithm, water quality attenuation model, algorithm control scheduling, strategy for optimal placement of water, and the quality sensors, filling field implementation. And quite a bit of work has been done here. And then, of course, as I said, this is a huge team is there from Robert Bosch Center, like Bharadwaj Amrutu, Professor Rajesh Sundareshan, Then we have the Yogesh Siman. Then we also have the Parsarthi Ramachandran, all my colleague professors in IISc. We have many PhD students who are working on these problems to take it forward. It's a joint project between IISc, BWSSB, and L&T. Of course, when it is done, it's one of the big such projects in the urban areas across the country. And as we can see here, this is one of the snapshots of our dashboarding, what we have tried to develop in terms of the flows, as you can see here, to understand the how the system is performing, the time series data, how we can use it and analyze them, as you can see here. So the next one, in fact, we can get a lot of data here, as you can see on the left side, the complete dashboarding from GIS to other things. It is data intensive, whether it is the pipelines, whether it is the storages, whether it is the elevations, whether it is the DMA area, all that can be analyzed and can be done in terms of the analysis. So we are also trying to look at the leak detection. We are looking at the experimented automated which will run into on required time for flow and no flow conditions. The model can also be used to introduce the periodic fluctuations, for instance, periodic changes in wall. In fact, we have done some experiments I'm going to show you in terms of in the lab, how to do the control experiment for leak detection. And all conditions have to be the same when they're running the experiments to ensure same equilibrium. Analysis of the experiments, normal distribution, log likelihood, everything has been done here. We have done this for in the lab. We have created time series data, and we are trying to understand how the leak detection can be done in a controlled experiment, whether that can be, once the algorithm is developed, can we take it to the field? That's the one which we are trying to look at. We have a smart water lab in IISc. This is the left side, you are seeing the lab view of that. And we have the different, it's a completely controlled system. We have the flow controls, we have the pressure controls, we have the variable speed drive pumps, and we can create any leakage at any given place. We can measure that, and we can create a leak and then try to measure that using experiments at the same time through algorithms. Whether we can identify that is the question which we are asking ourselves here. And of course, such a change in the state will come using such time series data. Can we identify the leak? We are reasonably successful in identifying such leaks. We are using the algorithm as well as the experiments which are all able to do here. And these are all the time series data which we developed across. And we have conducted several such experiments, as I was mentioning, creating a leak, and we have the log likelihood estimators here in terms of the possible leak locations, and can be identified is the one which we can trying to do that. We also did about pressure management. One of the active control method is for leak detection is during pressure management. Can we control the pressures to reduce the leakage? And the reduction in the background leaks for water network. So the leaks in the pipes will be there due to high pressure. Can we reduce the pressure? Ultimately, if we reduce too much, we cannot give the supply. Can we reduce such that the pressure we can, the leakages we can reduce? This is the one which we tried to do that. So we have actually tried to use this approach in applying it to one of the areas in Markera area in the Karyappa colony in near Coorg. I'm going to share that with you. But anyway, these are all the type of the data which will require to identify the leaks as we go along here. So the pressure management, what we're trying to do here, we have the fixed outlet method, flow-based modulation method, time-based modulation method, remote node-based method. We have a remote node modulation. We have a PRV. This is a DMA area. We have a control module. We can control the pressure. We can optimize the function. So obviously PRV setting can be done with a hydraulic model to reduce the leakages. A minimum pressure need to be maintained in the network for demand satisfaction. We need to do a high pressure in the network need to be reduced to prevent the pipe burst or the more leakages. That's a type of problem which we need to do that. So having posed this, we try to understand this. As I said, there is a field study near Coorg, in a small town near Coorg, in a small area. We try to do that. It has got about 217 pipes, 8 valves, and then we have the type of PRV. We have the measurement devices, flow meter inlet, pressure sensors. NOW was 24%. By controlling all these things, the pressure controls, we try to reduce the leakages, which we can see here. So here. So basically, the objective is to reduce the NRW. We need to do sectorization of water networks into pressure management areas based on the PRVs, formulation of simulation optimization method for PRV control in each PMA network, propose a supervisory manual control for water utilities without SCADA. So we need to develop the hydraulic model, network sectorization, pressure minimization, then leak reduction. That's the type of steps which you need to do that. So for which the methodology network we are done here. As you can see here from the source, you have different simple treat networks. Can you control this PRV to reduce the leakage? And of course, there is an algorithm here. I'm not going to go through that. Ultimately, we are going to see that there should be a sufficient pressure to supply, at the same time reduce the pressure so that you reduce the leakage. It's an optimization problem which we have posed, by which we are able to actually reduce the leakages. This again, the type of activity what we are trying to do that. How many, in doing that, how many dependent PRVs also will come can be identified by controlling one of the PRVs. The other path also can be controlled. That type of activity we are actually able to identify here. So the objective function we have posed here in a EPANET MATLAB environment. And as I told you, an objective function here, as you can see here, in terms of the pressure, target pressure, and then how much pressure we are going to generate. That we need to, critical node pressure, we need to minimize the square of the deviation. We need to do that to achieve the reducing the leakage. So the results of this PMA creation, we created the pressure management areas using these control valves, which is slightly different from DMAs. 7 PMAs were identified. One of the PMAs were found to have 2 PRVs associated with it. PRV 5 and 6 had to be throttled simultaneously to control the pressure. And ultimately, the type of results, valve settings were given here in terms of the pressure reductions at the critical points. When you try to do that, and ultimately, I think we reduce the, before control, we had 24% of NRW. And with multi-PRV, it was reduced to 18%. With only a single PRV, 22%. Please, we should also understand that though we can keep telling that put the valve and control, many of these valves will be very expensive. And also at the same time, to do the multiple control, as you can see here, it will interfere with each other. One should really know the hydraulics of it to do that. So ultimately, by pressure reduction, by playing around with that, we are able to reduce from 24% to 18% in this study, in a small study, which is a completely field measured, model developed, and instantly it has come out as a paper in some top journal also it has come. So looking at it, one can also look at for example, moving ahead, the average hours of per day of water service in selected Indian cities. You can see here how many hours it will be. For example, you can see about 2.5 hours, about 123 LPCD is there. And then the bar plot for supply of the SW4 DMA under Bangalore South Division. One can understand by measurement all that, how many hours it's being supplied, how much is the water being supplied, and what interventions you would like to bring. All that can be done if you have a proper measurement and monitoring system. And we also used under this imprint what's called complex network theory approach for water quality sensor placement. How many sensors have to be placed so that the water quality can be monitored properly? Where all has to be placed? We are trying to look at using the different approaches. Z1 time to detect the event. Expected population at risk is Z2. Expected volume of contaminated water is Z3. And detection likelihood is Z4. We have used all the approaches to look at the algorithm is developed. I'm not going to look at the algorithm, but ultimately how the network analysis can be done using such approaches is the one which we're trying to look at. So there are different techniques, as you can see here. Our method is the last one, which we are able to really achieve the required type of targets what we plan using all these approaches. This is much better than the type of algorithms which are given in the literature. It is possible to do that, and all these things will also tell you the quality of water, how it is supplied, how many people will be affected, how fast they may be affected, and how to control them. Once you know the problem, comes the how to control them, the antidote or whatever you want to do, it can be taken care of. And it's also possible to understand the water quality parameters. For example, we only say the water quality is changing. but all this, the chemical reactions will take place, how the attenuation will take place. For example, we have the Kb, the bulk water, the parameter, Kw is the wall reaction parameter. How to estimate them becomes very, very important in such scenarios. See, these are all some studies which we conducted earlier in bushy plains. What we can do that here, I'm not going to get into that. It is possible to use these algorithms to look at the water quality, how the water quality parameters are functioning, how the attenuation will take place, can be done is the question. I'm going to move faster in these slides. Ultimately, what I'm trying to convey to you here is, you have the set of AB measurements and measure value. Ultimately, given the set of measurements, you are able to really predict what's going to happen to your water quality. So that means there should be a monitoring mechanism. There should be a data coming in. You can create a mathematical model, and you need to really predict what's going to happen. It's all possible, as you can see here. It is using a mathematical model and the measurements in the field. So coming back to our own the field study which we are conducting in south of Bangalore, the water quality attenuation model which we have developed, the existing online residual chlorine sensors in the field study area will be there. Real water quality information is collected to monitor, analyze the network, the health. It can be done, and the different quality, the coloring here shows how the water quality is changing across. And we also have the grab sample which we have collected at different months. For a large amount of data is available, which we have used to analyze them. And then we have categorized them in terms of continuous system, intermittent system, monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, and 2-point data set, like the 3-point data set, etc. And then we are trying to identify what is the attenuation rate. It's the inverse problem, like anything. We try to understand, once you know the parameter, it has an inverse problem. I mean, the system parameter, you know how the system is going to perform. That's what we have been done here. So basically, in the field study, it is aim is to obtain the field chlorine measurements to accurately calibrate the study area. Calibrate the study area of drinking water pipe system for decay rate, considering the impact of pipe material, pipe velocity, diameter, and flow conditions. This is what we're trying to do here. And we have done a lot of sampling data, which I'm not going to get into detail here. So sampling distribution also becomes very, very important here. And we have the district metering area, DMA 101, zone 1, zone 2 at different points. We have collected a lot of data here. I'm going to move. So when you try to look at the challenges when you try to look at higher temperatures and more extreme, less predictable weather conditions will affect distribution of rainfall, river flows, groundwater, deteriorating water quality, it deteriorates. Low-income groups who are living in critical parts of urban areas are vulnerable to the threats of water supply a lot more than the other people. Variation in water availability will impact health and food security. Migration of rural population to urban centers has resulted in towns and cities expanding rapidly, which is a challenge how to address water supply to them. Distribution of ration water to communities is a challenge due to hydraulic inequities favoring fewer areas. Overloading of water treatment facilities is a concern. Obviously, it's not going to perform. To load that, it's not going to perform very well. That becomes a challenge. So how are we going to do the adaptive capacity should be built at the city scale in the context of urban water supply? One need to really build leadership and action on climate change adaptation, define adaptation priorities, implement adaptation processes and projects. When you try to look at the conditions, awareness of climate change impacts, access to climate change information, communication between scientists, policymakers, and practitioners, adaptation priorities, contextualize the historical and social needs, link to development priorities, build technical capacity, build institutional support, adaptation processes, ensure understanding of the need for implementation of across government departments, strengthen technical capacity, link to other relevant development initiatives, space for re-evaluation, reflection on the responses. So when you try to look at water future, what are the things, importance of water sector in near future? If you try to recollect, all of us, 2 years back, Honorable Prime Minister during Independence Day speech, he announced the Jal Jeevan Mission. In fact, being a part of, partly in terms of that, I can also tell you it's going on very well. The whole thing will try to lead to 350 lakh crores to improve the water infrastructure, One need to really look at also the per drop more crop in the irrigation, wastewater and saltwater treatment. The coastal places saltwater intrusion treatment need to be done. Water awareness program, reviving water bodies need to be looked into. And also we need to really look at the water safety plans, which are comprehensive risk management plans for protection of structural integrity, water quality integrity, and water quantity in supply systems. The whole objective is to prevent water contamination from catchment to consumer, prevent recontamination during the storage and distribution, prevent cross-contamination from sewer lines, optimization of treatment plant performance for enhanced water quality. So in the smart city mission, cities are engines of growth for the economy of every nation. Nearly 31% of the India's current population lives in cities, urban areas, contribute 63% of India's GDP, expected to house 40% of India's population and contribute to 75% of India's GDP by 2030. The basic philosophy to adopt a comprehensive plan, and of course, sewage treatment being the most important one, is one of the important which we really need to look at how to bring back the wastewater into circulation. So 10 core smart city elements: adequate water supply, of course, assured electricity supply, sanitation including solid waste management, efficient urban mobility and public transport, affordable housing, robust IT connectivity and digitalization, good technology-based governance, sustainable environment, safety and security of all citizens, health and education. Of course, in this, the water is one of the key things as we are going to talk about. We talked about. Possibly the way forward, distribution of network monitoring and analysis for efficient operation of and UFW reduction, monitoring, measuring and modeling of groundwater and aquifer systems, use of satellite and other modern technologies for monitoring water bodies, source water protection, rainwater harvesting, black and grey water treatment and reuse for non-potable purposes, supply management, supply and demand management, asset management, stormwater collection and treatment and reuse, ICT application in water distribution systems and overall in the water resources, disaster management like urban flooding, can we avoid that? Identification of alternate sources of water. So no work is complete without the contribution. Obviously, I want to acknowledge my students, Sheetal Kumar, Bharanidharan, Anjana, Rucha Vaidya, Samiran, and Priyanka. There are also other students, works are also like Gunavalli and so many other people who are all there. I really take this opportunity to thank all of them. And before I leave out, I should want to say that all these things are only to show that how important the ICT and IoT becomes in water sector. What are the challenging problems in the water area, both from source to the consumer? This is what I wanted to paint the picture. And without taking much time, I would like to thank you, and it's open for any questions. And Dr. Shanmuga Sundar, thank you very much. Maybe you can coordinate and control it so that there won't be any cross listing, and whoever want to ask me any question. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Madam.
I would like to thank Mohan Kumar sir for his valuable if there are any questions, we are open. Any questions from the participants?
Yeah, kindly identify yourself and let it be focused questions. Thank you. Yeah.
1 second, sir. Hello, can you hear me, sir?
Oh, yes, I can hear. I can hear, please. Yes, I can hear.
Okay, thank you, sir. So there is question, how gamers are used to place sensors in water distribution system?
How? Repeat, Dr. Sundar.
How gamers, GAMERS, gamers are used to place sensors in water?
Okay, nice. Honestly, my honest answer is I don't know. I think the people are working on it. But then one of the things which I talked about, we can use optimization tools. What we do is every node we take it as a possible node for a sensor placement, and then try to simulate thousands of scenarios, and ultimately we optimize in terms of either cost or the signals which we want to pick up, and then try to see which is the optimal solution, and then try to converge to that solution in terms of the number of sensors. And again, I will also repeat, there are two things. One is the cost, the number of sensors. Other is the location of the sensors. Okay. Definitely, it's a useful algorithm, though I have not used it. Yes, Dr. Sundar.
Any questions from any of the participants?
Yeah, please. Yeah, we can have a lot of discussion. We have time, no problem at all. That's why we finished up fast. We can have kindly, please.
Sir, I don't think so there are any further questions. So I again thank you very much, Mohan sir, for your valuable insight about how the water can be managed and how smartly we can implement the water usage. Especially you have taken scenarios with respect to Bangalore city and explained us very well. So I thank you very much, sir, on behalf of Sundar sir and the organizing committee of this FDP. Thank you very much, sir, again for your wonderful session.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much to all the organizers and especially Dr. Shanmuga Sundar for giving me an opportunity, and also all the participants. Thank you very much. And feel free, if you still have any, you can always send any question through email also. I can always reply. And thank you. Dr. Sundar, I can log off now. I am still open. If you
Sir, one more question, sir.
Oh, no problem. Please. I am free. I can ask. Yeah.
Sir, how frequently the groundwater characteristics to be monitored?
Okay. See, now what we normally monitor is only about pre-monsoon and post-monsoon season twice a year. It will be maintained. It will be monitored at a large scale. But in a smaller scale, when it should be done as frequently as possible. Possibly every month at least, one should really have the water level and quality. And one should have at least a monthly monitoring is required.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I can ask
Okay,
the
sir.
members also to join. Thank you. Mohan Kumar sir,
Yes,
Dr.
please.
Kincha.
Oh, namaskara, sir. Namaste, sir.
Namaskara, Mohan Kumar. How are you?
I saw you, sir. Thank you, sir. I am fine, sir.
I wanted to know one information about the BWSSB. How
sir.
much of the database of consumer is automated in BWSSB?
Oh, yes, sir. Thank you, sir. First of all, this is the only city in the country in which we have almost 100% metering, sir. It is completely metered. The demand side, it's completely metered, which itself is some sort of a special thing for the city. And all the apartments and high-rise building, all the meters are actually automatic meters, sir. Automatically, the data will come to the board itself, AMRs, automatic meters. So whereas the individual meters at houses, it has to be read. It is still not the fly past, drive past. It's still not there. But they're all magnetic meters and error-free. It's quite metering is done. Except, for example, in the slum areas and things like that, or the very low income group areas where there's a bulk supply. As you know, we don't have any public stand posts, which used to be there. But there is an obligation, rightly so, on BWSSB to supply water to these low-income group areas free. So where they try to put some meters, but there will be some resistance because they think that somebody is going to charge them. So that through NGOs, they are trying some sort of a push and pull will go on. Other than that, quite a bit of metering is done, but not everything is automatic. That's what I wanted to convey.
No, but what I wanted to know was this, for example, in BESCOM, for example, in the Bangalore city metropolitan, we have about 1 crore and 10 lakh customers.
Yes.
And all the 1 crore and 10 lakh customers data is now available in a common database with the meter number and with the consumer ID and the consumption every month, whether taken automatically or by manual, whatever it is, that
Yes.
data and bills are generated by the computer. Is anything like this happening in the water supply system?
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sure. Thank you. I think, yes. We have 16 lakh connections in Bangalore, sir. 16 lakh connections.
Only 16 lakhs?
Yeah. How it is, I'll tell you. There's a difference. Energy meters in a house, if there are 3 floors, energy, there will be 3 meters.
Yes.
If there are 3 floors, there will be only 1 water meter, sir. Only
Yes.
1 water meter.
Yes, I can understand that.
Yeah, there are 16 lakh connections in Bangalore.
And this you are talking about the Bangalore city area only or the Bangalore metropolitan?
No, Bangalore city. Bangalore. No,
City.
Bangalore. I will tell you. What has happened is that area of 110 villages, it's still being integrated quite a bit. So we try to take. We have though it is BWC supplies are being built in. Still, some of those areas have not got the water supply yet. They are drawing through groundwater. So, especially more than the Bangalore core area, we have 16 lakh connections, and on average, you can take more than 5 to 6 per house, more than 5 to 6. So, roughly, we are actually monitoring about 1 lakh people through the
1 crore people. 1 crore.
Yes, sir. Thank you. 1 crore people through monitoring we are doing. And we have about 4 lakh borewell connections, which is also actually identified, which is there with the BWSSB. So all this data is available with BWSSB. It is available. Consumption and the other things, especially the water being supplied, which is
Very
available.
good. Someone asked thought, not a question, actually a thought.
Yeah.
If you declare water as a national asset, as Israel has done,
Yeah.
will it help the systems?
Yes and no. Yes, will be very good, but at the same time, the drinking water supply, the one can't control, sir. For example, if somebody is having a well, somebody wants to take that water, he has a right to live. So, for example, they take as a national resource and they are unable to supply water, that becomes quite a challenging one. That is where I think many of the courts and other things will not come into picture, because there is a right to live. That's one of the reasons. Even the cost of water cannot be increased like energy. For example, in the energy, automatically it gets into the other, like the rates can be increased. In water supply, it cannot. So the rates are also quite low. So that way there is a real problem, but there is a balance between the two which is going on. I should also add here, there is a national water policy, there is a state water policy which is in the public document, state water reuse, recycled water policy, which are all, one of them is like this, what you are talking about, bringing in the common assets, everybody has got a right over that, then the pricing control, all that is talked about, sir.
The point I was trying to say, Mohan Kumar sir, is that if we declare it as an asset and we keep account of every rupee and we keep account of every drop of water in the country, then probably it gives us a much better accounting and much better systems that can come into the play.
I won't say the accounting is not there. We do it at the catchment scale. For example, you take Kaveri Basin, then we do it at the scale. Then we do
every drop of water, including rainfall, including everything.
Yes, it's being looked into. And then water is a state subject, sir. One of the key things you know very well, water is a state subject. Water is not a national subject. We have these disputes between definitely states, between districts, you are aware, between cities, you are aware, between areas, for example, Jayanagar versus Baswantagudi or whatever, there are fights. So it's very tricky things, but people are working towards it. That is where they bringing in other water, for example, rainwater harvesting, recycled water, all that is being brought in to bring in this balance between the two.
Last question. This Jaggi Vasudev's effort of Kaveri rejuvenation.
How
far it has progressed and what is the impact till now?
I honestly, I don't know full details, sir, but one thing is good in the sense I can share it with you. Incidentally, I went for the inauguration itself when it was called in the palace
Yes,
ground.
yes.
Invited.
It's a
Anyway,
huge project. Yeah.
yeah, and the point is greening any of the next to the riverbeds. You also agree, all of us agree, it's a very good idea. Greening them,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
so that it brings the local catchment and local the microclimate will change. Then soil erosion will stop. Then biomass growth will be there. So locally, you could hold moisture is going to become very, very important. And people are also on the other side argue that my evapotranspiration may increase, this may increase, which may not be
Yeah.
that this one, but such huge investments to be done, and then it should be linked to some agro-forestry which is talking about. It should generate something. But in the process, if people cut off all the trees and things like that, it's going to be a disaster. So we must be very careful in this. But I think it's a good idea to green them, and we have to wait and watch what's going to happen, sir.
Thank you, Professor Mohan Kumar. Very nice talking to you after a long time. Thank you.
Thank you like this. Sir. Thank you very much, Professor Kincha.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Professor Mohan Kumar.
Thank you.
One more question from the participant.
Oh, sure. Dr. Sundar. Yeah, please.
The architect Deepthi Rayaprolu. Our question is like, are meters accurate? How you ensure that?
Right. Okay. Yeah, sure. No, I think frequent calibration.
One more question, sir. So,
No,
how often we need to check accuracy?
Yeah. Shall I answer that, Dr. Sundar? Yeah.
Yeah, you can answer.
Yeah. See, water meters will be calibrated. In fact, in the and then also in the field also. For example, even in the domestic, for example, if some of us will go through lot of errors in that, we complain, they come and change the meter, recalibrate it, and as the meter becomes bigger meters, the calibration is needed to be done more frequently. And then, of course, there's always a dispute. For example, even to big campuses like IISc itself, you take, for example, or BIAL, and we are doing big project for Bangalore International Airport. There will be a dispute between BIAL and BWSSB. That has to be sorted out by calibration, frequent calibration. Yeah. Yeah. Any other question, Dr. Sundar? Yeah.
Sir, like, is there a possibility for a meter being faulty because of quality of water?
Is there a possibility of what?
Like, will quality of water matters? Like, will it make any difference on the meter? Will it be like, if the meter become
Meters. On meters, it may not make a difference, but on our health, it will definitely make a difference. On meters, except the quality extreme case, it will make a difference. Suppose there is a lot of silt which is carried. Let us say the worst situation, it is not even properly filtered. So there is going to be a choking and things like that of the meter itself. Okay, there will be fine sand and other things which is going to have issue on the meter. The other way around, the water which passes through all that comes into our kitchen or elsewhere, which we drink. Obviously, it's going to have health issues. So quality becomes very important. In fact, what can be seen if the quality, color and all, which is very visible, but it's very simple. What cannot be seen is a big issue. The quality. Water may look clean, but may not be good as far as quality is concerned. Dissolved matter, that will be more dangerous.
So,
Yeah, Dr. Sundar. Yeah.
Yes, sir. I think, we have taken up enough questions.
Okay. Yeah. I
Request
think
participants so that we can clarify. Ramya madam? Yeah, please finish, madam. Conclude it, madam.
Okay, so I would like to again thank Mohan Kumar sir for his wonderful insight about the different smart water technology that we have seen. So sir has actually briefed us about how the impacts of the climate change can change the water quality, and also he's briefed us about the different water balance studies. So about water security and also about all the other impacts that can affect the water infrastructure, and also how he has also answered various questions which has come from our participants. So I would like to thank Mohan Kumar sir for this wonderful session. Thank you very much, sir. On behalf of Dr. Shanmukha Sundar sir and also the entire committee of Atal FDP, I would like to thank you for your wonderful session, and also from the participants end. Thank you for your valuable time for sparing it with us. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much to all the organizers.
Okay, thank you, one and all, sir. Thank you, sir, Mohan Kumar sir, for your wonderful presentation.
Thank you. As I was telling you, Dr. Sundar, I
Potential disturbance.
yeah, now I come to your the other.
So,
yeah.
Request all the participants to come back at 2:15 after completing.
Thank you.
Have-
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I log off. Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah.
So we'll end the meeting, sir, now.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.